Today we speak with the environmentalist and scientist Tierra Curry, who, from her native Kentucky, offers to the global audience her views on the current environmental crisis. Thank you, Tierra, for your time to do this interview. Now, do you think that traveling is important to develop a better ecological awareness?
Yes, and to get to know other cultures and other landscapes and to see the environment and talk to people and communities. I would recommend that people just do it on their own, like not necessarily go as part of a tour. Like a lot of people who go to see the monarch butterflies, they get on a bus in Mexico City, they go to the monarch reserve, they spend 2 hours there on a tour, and then they go back to Mexico City. And you can just rent a car and go, and then you have time to talk to the people, talk to the guides, talk to the vendors, and go at your own pace. And I think that a lot of people have a lot of fear of travel, and of course, coronavirus makes all of the logistics and more complicated. But when you have the opportunity to travel, I definitely recommend it.
I love the bicycle, which is actually my main means of transportation. Do you own a bicycle?
I do. I have a touring bike and I have a mountain bike. And I used to live in Arizona, and when I lived there, I did a lot of bicycle camping, which was really fun.
To be honest, your name catches my attention. Where does it coming from?
I think that Curry used to be O'Curry. My dad's ancestors are from Scotland and Ireland, so I think that's from there. And Tierra for a while, it was a pretty popular girl's name. It's fallen out of favor now, but like back in the 80s, 70s, and 80s, there were it was a rising popularity name, but then it just plummeted.
How your origin have shaped the person who you are today?
I grew up in the Appalachian Mountains, and I grew up really poor, so my mom grew our food. We gardened and hunted and searched for food in the woods. So I played in the creek. I grew up really connected to the land because my mom basically took care of our family by gardening and hunting and like searching for food in the woods. And so I feel really lucky because I grew up in this beautiful place, but it was also a place that was being destroyed by the coal industry for mining, and the mining like ruined our well water and polluted the creek. And so from childhood, I was aware of how connected we are to the land, and also how endangered it is, and how like corporations can wipe out an entire area in a matter of weeks, and that it needs a lot more protection.
The economic arguments put forward by the big oil companies, is it still a valid excuse in the face of the present crisis?
I think that, for so long people have said you can't drink oil and you can't eat money, and it's so true, and it's still a lesson that most people don't realize. We're in the middle of an extinction crisis, we're in the middle of a climate emergency, and we can't continue with business as usual. And the old arguments about like economic factors, they just fall apart because we're really looking at the demise of life on Earth. Like there's fires on the West Coast, there's floods and hurricanes on the East Coast, there's windstorms in the middle of the country, there's fires in the Amazon, there's even fires in the Arctic now. Like the entire planet is melting down, and I, for one, have lost patience with the economic arguments of the fossil fuel industry and other harmful industries, because we have to come up with a different way of doing things, and they are the ones that are holding us back.
Denying climate change has become increasingly difficult now that more and more people are experiencing the consequence of it firsthand, right?
I think that because more and more people see these tragedies on the news or experience them firsthand, it's going to become harder and harder for anybody to be able to deny that we're in a climate crisis, and people are going to demand political change, and are. Like the Conference of the Parties is happening right now for biodiversity and climate change, and people from around the world are just basically saying we're not going to take it anymore. Like we have to have a clean, healthy environment and a stable climate because our well-being is at stake.
Have you had any personal experience regarding a climate change catastrophe?
I have not been in a situation where my life was in danger, but several times, like I've seen the consequences firsthand. One was in Portland, Oregon, a couple of years ago. We had a really big forest fire that rained ash over the city for days. It was literally snowing ash, and even in the middle of the day, it was dark outside and the air was terrible. And that was really a moment where I was like, wow, climate change is here, it's everywhere. And then this past summer, one of the things I do in summer is I try to see how many different rivers I can swim in. And so I drove down to Tennessee just to drive around and swim in rivers. And they had historic, unprecedented flooding, even of small creeks that had never flooded before. They just overtopped their banks and washed out roads, and people did lose their lives. And I just happened to be down there to see that firsthand and realize that, like, even the interior of the United States is seeing the consequences of climate change now. It's not just coastal hurricanes and western wildfires. It's here in the middle of the country.
What about mental health, considering how dire the situation is? Is there still enough room for hope?
It's a really good question, and there's a whole field of study around eco-anxiety now, which is how, like, awareness of how dire the global situation is having effects on people's mental health. But there's also a lot of research on how experiencing nature is good for people's mental health, and how even, like, looking at birds or plants or going for a walk in the forest actually helps people mentally, and it's like a spiritual reset. And so I think that people have to spend time outside, getting that nature bath, but also for me, I have to fight for policies. Like, for me to feel okay, like, I have to feel like I'm making a difference. And so that's why I work really hard to get better policies in the United States for endangered species and to end extinction, because I feel like I have to be doing something. And there's a lot of things people can do in their daily lives to take better care of the environment, but I think we need policy level changes as well. And then there's also the realization that we're kind of looking at all of this in a strange way, that, like, humans are separate from the environment. Like, humans are part of the environment. When you hurt the environment, you're hurting humans. When you protect the environment, you're protecting humans. Like, we're part of the landscape. We're animals, basically, and it's easy for us to forget that and think of protecting the environment as a luxury. And I think part of that, too, is just the Western paradigm. Like, indigenous cultures emphasize that, like, the environment isn't separate from culture, and most biodiversity globally has been safeguarded by indigenous communities. So the Western world really needs to rethink things and basically get schooled on that.
Finally, we are in a global crisis for which global measures are needed, right?
Yeah, we are in the middle of an extinction crisis and a climate crisis and all sorts of social justice crises around the world. And I think that we have to address all of them together. They can't be siloed. All injustice is intertwined, and we really have to fight climate change, biodiversity loss, and social injustice at the same time, so that the standard of living for everyone is improved and we're safeguarding the environment for future generations. And I know I personally struggled with despair for years and came to feel paralyzed by it. Like, I'm only one person. What can I do? And then I realized that despair was, it was kind of a luxury. It came from a place of privilege for me. And a lot of people don't have the space to do that. They have to fight every day. And that helped me realize that I have to fight every day. That action is the antidote to the despair that I was feeling. And I am hopeful that the world is more connected than it's ever been. A lot of people are more aware than they've ever been, and I think there's a willingness for people across sectors to work together to fight injustice in all of its forms. So I'm hopeful that we can keep doing the hard work, and it will make a difference. Like, right now, the Conference of the Parties Global Biodiversity Summit is happening, and that's a key issue on the table, is assuring that people have the right to their lands, and they're not just fenced off and set aside in the name of conservation, that people are part of the landscape. And we have to address the global situation and have, just conservation initiatives and not initiatives that are based on genocide or taking land away from people.
Thank you very much one more time, Tiara.
Thank you, Omar. Take care. Cuida.
Bye.
Bye.
Listen to this and other podcasts on Omar Global Radio, omarglobal.com. From Quebec, Canada, Omar Diaz reported.